On February 27, 1933, the Reichstag fire struck Weimar Germany's parliament building, sending citizens of the Republic into a panicked fear of communist aggression. Although the attack was in reality planned, instigated, and executed by SS agents, communists had been blamed in order to create a false sense of emergency. The very next day, Adolf Hitler persuaded then-President Paul von Hindenburg of Germany to, quote, sign a decree suspending the 7 sections of the Constitution which guaranteed individual and civil liberties, close quote. With one emergency, the Nazis had license to completely control press and radio institutions, closing down any that did not comply. They banned and burned books categorized as un-German, and they said, it's an emergency. In the first few months of Soviet rule, the Bolsheviks shut down press and speech, all while claiming it was, quote, a different kind of censorship, aimed only at protecting the interests of the working class, close quote. They justified their oppression by claiming emergency, even benefit. And they said, this time it's different. In pre-revolutionary Cuba, under the Batista regime, censorship began to sink its teeth into the citizenry. Not only did this censorship lay the groundwork for Castro's totalitarian state, but it is an ominous portent of the current day. In Batista's own words, quote, censorship is as distasteful to me as it is to any other person who believes in a democratic system of government. It is my honest belief that the only time censorship is justified is when national security is threatened by the lack of it. I give my assurance that censorship was applied in Cuba as a temporary emergency measure, close quote. With this justification, Batista suspended constitutional protections as it fit his purposes. And he said, don't worry, it's temporary. Shortly after, Cuba would fall to Castro. In current-day America, many citizens see the abridgment of free speech as a noble cause, as something that is not only a benign concept, but a moral imperative. Using policies supported by everyday Americans, anti-racism, anti-hate speech, anti-falsehoods, the censors of today promote a form of valiant censorship that is harder to combat in today's sympathetic culture. Under the guise of righteousness, businesses and social platforms collude with governments to crack down on unpopular opinion. Many Americans now lower their voices and look over their shoulders when expressing personal views. What was acceptable speech yesterday may not be acceptable today, and what is acceptable today may not be tomorrow. This censorship never stays within the bounds of its intent. Even when censors are well-meaning, no amount of conformity ever ends up being enough for the beast they feed. Concessions are currently being made in the name of emergency. Public and private policies are being implemented, and people are beginning to fear opening their mouths. And they say, it's the right thing to do. The great Thomas Paine once said, quote, all who would make their own liberty secure must guard even their enemy from oppression. For if you violate this duty, you establish a precedent that will reach yourself, close quote. As more and more historical warning signs appear in the cultural and political spheres of the US, citizens must now unchain the marketplace of ideas and rechain the censorial power of the state. Americans are faced with a decision: allow freedom of expression in its freest form, or suppress it in the supposed name of necessity. Emergency constitutional overreach, government surveillance, and social humiliation of those with dangerous opinions are not unique to these totalitarian states of the 1900s. These exact problems plague the modern world and should be recognized for what they are: precursors. The emergency erosion of First Amendment liberties is not an isolated event. It is a step. In the words of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, quote, there always is this fallacious belief. It would not be the same here. Such things are impossible. Alas, all the evil of the 20th century is possible everywhere on earth. In the words of John Adams, quote, for the jaws of power are always open to devour, and her arms are always stretched out, if possible, to destroy the freedom of thinking, speaking, and writing, close quote. Nazi Germany, Communist Russia, Cuba, all have fallen to censorship, but free speech still stands. Here, in the United States of America, the great bulwark of liberty, in the words of Cato, the pivotal deciding factor between a free nation and a dystopia. Is any cost great enough to abridge this right? Is any speech too dangerous, any alternative too tempting to destroy the very foundation of a free society? We say no, give us liberty. For in the words of James Madison, freedom of speech has ever been justly deemed the only effectual guardian of every other right. Thank you.